I was leaning against the hood of my car, parked next to plate 128, when they finally emerged. Her face went pale as soon as she saw me, avoiding my gaze while I straightened up. He instinctively raised his hands as if expecting a fight, but I simply told them, "You're not worth my time," and walked away, getting into my car. This confrontation was just another chapter in a long, complicated history. I first met Brad when his family moved in next door. We were both 8, the only boys around, so we naturally became as close as brothers by the time we hit 4th grade. We were inseparable, always playing sports together and watching each other's backs, and that bond stayed strong all the way through high school. I met Megan during my sophomore year, and we started dating. By the time we were seniors, we were still together. Brad got involved with Rachel Collins, and we often went on double dates. Prom night was a turning point. Megan gave herself to me in the next room while Brad and Rachel were doing the same. After high school, Brad joined the Navy, and Megan and I went off to college. I enrolled in civil engineering at Eastern Michigan University, while Megan pursued a degree in information technology at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Although our campuses were close, maintaining our relationship wasn't easy. Megan would occasionally cancel our dates, and I had no idea she was meeting someone else until friends from U of M started telling me about her behavior. One evening, I decided to follow Megan and a guy to a restaurant on Ann Arbor Road. The moment she noticed me, she distanced herself from him, but it was clear from the way they interacted that they were more than just acquaintances. That night wasn't their first rendezvous, and I felt like an idiot for not catching on sooner. I had no clue what they were talking about, but the way Megan kept glancing at me nervously while I pretended not to care made it obvious that she was hiding something. After finishing my meal, I left without saying a word to her and drove straight home. The next day, which was a Friday, came and went without me showing up for our planned date or even bothering to call and cancel. Instead, I buried myself in a book, shutting out the world. On Saturday, I went to a party at the Delta Phi house, where I met Chloe, who left quite an impression on me. Sunday was dedicated to studying until I was interrupted by the doorbell. Looking through my telescope, I saw Megan standing outside. I opened the door, and she slipped past me into the room. She turned to me and asked, "Where were you Friday night? Why didn't you answer the phone?" I shut the door and faced her, asking which question she wanted me to tackle first. "What?" she replied, confused. There were 3 questions, Megan. Which one should I answer first? I could see the frustration in her eyes as she pressed, "Don't sugarcoat it, Ethan." "What's going on?" "All right, I'll go in my order. First, where I've been, I was mostly here, though I did hit up a frat party Saturday night. Second, why I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't hear it because you didn't call. Yeah, my bad for unplugging it. Now, where were you Friday night? Right here, ordered some pizza, and got lost in a great book. Why didn't you tell me you weren't coming?" she demanded. "I figured you were too busy with your other boyfriend," I responded, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Boyfriend? What are you talking about, Ethan? You're my boyfriend, really? Then who was the guy you were snuggled up with at that restaurant on Thursday?" "He's just a friend, Ethan. We're not in love or anything, yeah." "Then why were you sitting so close, leaning on him like that, and why did he have his arm around you? If that's not being lovey-dovey, then what is it?" "It's nothing, Ethan. We're just friends." "Well, if it's no big deal, why didn't you come over and say hi? Why didn't you invite me to join you or introduce me to your friend? Maybe you hesitated because you didn't want him to know who I was. Maybe you didn't want to explain it if it bothered you so much. Why didn't you come up and say something? Because I wanted to see how you'd act, to watch how you behave. Why would you want to do that? Because I've been hearing things about your dating life when I'm not around. People told me you've been out with other guys on nights when we had plans, so yeah, I wanted to see for myself. You don't control me, Ethan. Nowhere does it say we're exclusive. I thought we were, Megan. I remember giving you my ring and leather sweater as a sign we were committed." "A sweater and a ring? Are you serious, Ethan? That's so childish, maybe, but it happened in high school, and when we graduated, you didn't give them back and say, 'School's over, so are we.' But if that's how you see it, I guess I can start seeing it the same way too. I met a nice girl at that party, and she gave me her number, so maybe I'll give her a call." Megan's face twisted in anger as she spat, "Go ahead, I don't care," before storming out. As I watched her leave, it hit me that she didn't bother making excuses or promising not to do it again. She didn't even try to convince me of her loyalty. She had grown up and wasn't the same schoolgirl anymore. She wanted something different. It was hard, given our history, but I knew it was better to confront her feelings now than to let them fester. From Monday to Wednesday, I buried myself in homework. By Thursday, I finally called Chloe, and we set up a date for Friday night. I picked her up, we had dinner, and instead of a movie, she suggested we go to a party she'd heard about. We arrived at an apartment in Belleville around 8 p.m., and fate decided to have a little fun with me. The first faces I saw were Megan's and the guy she'd been with on Thursday. "Oh, damn," I muttered. "What's wrong?" Chloe asked. "Those two," I nodded in their direction. "Do you know them?" "Yeah, I know her." "That's Miss Piggy. Why do you call her that?" "Because she's promiscuous. She earned the nickname Miss Piggy, and you know why." "What else would you call someone who's supposedly committed but still entertains other men when her boyfriend's not around?" "Are you really sure about that? Especially with all the rumors floating around?" "Honestly, I can't say I've seen it firsthand, but I've heard from several guys that she's been more than a little flirty with them." "You never mentioned how you know her." "Well, I'm the guy she was supposed to marry, until I caught her last Thursday with the same guy she's with now." "Oh boy, does that mean we can expect some drama tonight?" "Nope, we ended things on Sunday, so it's officially over." "What are the chances you'd have ever heard from me if Thursday hadn't happened?" "Pretty slim. But Thursday did happen, and here we are, so let's just have a good time." She took my hand and led me over to meet the host. Megan, who had been off to the side, looked completely shocked when she saw me walk in. I couldn't tell if it was because she didn't expect to see me here or because she was with her new boyfriend. I ignored her as Chloe introduced me to Derek and his wife, who were both artists. We exchanged a few pleasantries before heading to the bar to grab some drinks. The basement had been transformed into a dance floor, and Chloe and I spent the night dancing, mingling, and having a blast. Whenever I caught a glimpse of Megan, her expression was unreadable. Around 11 p.m., Chloe suggested we head out since she had plans on Saturday. After saying goodbye to our hosts, I drove her home. "Your ex seemed pretty focused on you tonight," she commented as we pulled up to her place. "She was probably just surprised to see me there." "No, I think she was uneasy seeing you with someone else." "Well, that's her problem. She's the reason we're not together anymore." "Maybe, but I don't think she's happy about it." "Maybe not, but she's going to have to deal with it." "So, does that mean I'll be seeing more of you, or are you planning to start dating other girls?" "I prefer to date one girl at a time. I had a great time tonight, and I'd like to ask you out again. If you're interested, you'll be the only one." "And what if I'm not ready for something explosive?" "Then you'll turn me down, and I'll find someone else to date." "If she says no too, I might check back with you." "If you're still not ready, I'll keep looking until I find someone who's always a yes." "I like your straightforward approach. I'm open to it." "How about tomorrow night?" "Sounds good to me." I walked her to the door, said goodnight, and just as I was about to leave, she stopped me, asking for a moment. Turning back to face her, she admitted, "I usually don't kiss on the first date, but I guess there's a first time for everything," and then she kissed me. "See you tomorrow," she called out as she headed inside. When I got home, Dad told me that Megan had called and sounded pretty upset. I told him it was too late to call her back and that I'd do it in the morning as part of my routine. Saturday morning, I slept in, and when I finally made it to the kitchen for some coffee, Mom urged me to call Megan. "She's already called twice this morning." "Not until I've had my coffee," I replied. "Are things okay between you two?" Mom asked, concerned. "It's more complicated now," I said. "Does she know?" "She should. It was her choice." Just then, the phone rang. Mom answered and told me it was for me. "It's Megan." I picked up the phone and greeted her with a simple, "Yes, why didn't you call me?" she asked, her voice tense. "I got in too late last night to call, and I just woke up," I replied. "That's not what I meant. Why didn't you call me last night for our usual Friday date? We already discussed this last Sunday, Megan. You said we weren't explosive anymore and agreed to see other people. I told you if that's what you wanted, would do the same, and you left in a hurry." "That's not what I meant, Ethan. You should have known that." "Don't try to spin it, Megan. You were clearly with that guy I saw you with last Thursday." "I wasn't with him, Ethan. I went to that party alone, and he just happened to be there." "Sure, Megan, believe what you want. But it doesn't change anything. I've been hearing things about you and how you got the nickname Miss Piggy. I don't know what you've heard, Ethan, but it's not true. Why shouldn't I believe it? After seeing you with your friend at the restaurant, I'm not buying that you just bumped into him at the party. He was too close, hugging you when I walked in. No, Megan, you're not committed to just me, and I'm not interested in being one of many. Please return the ring and the leather sweater. It seems they don't mean anything to you anymore, unlike in high school. I'll catch you later. Goodbye. That seems pretty final, Mom remarked after I hung up the phone. She made it clear that being exclusive with me wasn't enough for her. And as I said, I'm not interested in being just one of many. During all of this, I found comfort in spending time with Chloe. Brad's letters still arrived every couple of weeks, filling me in on his life. He had graduated from boot camp and was now in specialized training, joining a Navy construction battalion, what they call the Navy SEALs. He was learning everything from building to demolition. He never asked about Rachel, so I made sure not to mention her in my replies. I knew he wouldn't want to hear about her anyway. Within a week of his deployment, Rachel was already chasing after someone she met at a party. A month later, she moved in with a coworker. 3 months after that, she moved again, this time with a guy she met when he towed her car to a store. Rumor had it that he made her entertain his friends at his apartment. Then Rachel vanished without a trace until I received another letter from Brad. He had finished his training and was stationed permanently in Norfolk. When he arrived, he asked Rachel to join him. I wish you could be my best man, he wrote, but we had so little time to prepare. The sooner we get married, the sooner we can secure housing on base, Brad had said, sounding hopeful. Poor guy. I had a sinking feeling that the moment he left, she'd have another man in her life before the sound of the door closing even faded. Money wasn't an issue for me, thanks to my grandparents, who had set up a college fund for me when I was born. It had enough to cover both tuition and the rent for an off-campus apartment if I wanted. So, at the start of my junior year, Chloe and I moved in together, giving me a taste of family life, which I quickly grew to love. After about 6 months, I started thinking seriously about making our arrangement permanent. But deep down, I had doubts that what Chloe and I had was too perfect to be true. And those doubts were confirmed when I brought up the idea of searching for an engagement ring. That's when she dropped the bombshell. She planned to return to California after graduation and marry her childhood sweetheart, who was studying in England on a Rhodes Scholarship. They both knew each other's situations, including his relationship with an Englishwoman. They had agreed that it wasn't realistic to abstain from physical closeness for several years, so they decided on an open relationship. It shouldn't change anything between us, Ethan, she assured me. But it did, especially for me. I felt like I'd been pulled out of what I thought was a romantic partnership and into something that felt more like just a friendship. The problem was, I wasn't interested in casual flings. I wanted more than just physical connection, I wanted something deeper. Because of that, Chloe and I gradually drifted apart. Almost exactly 4 months after Chloe shattered my romantic hopes, she said, "You don't seem happy here, do you?" I admitted I wasn't and explained why. "I'm sorry, darling," she said, looking genuinely sad. "Sometimes I wish I didn't love Alex so much so I could be what you need. If it weren't for him, you'd be my partner. Thanks, I guess." "So, what's the plan now?" I asked. "Shall we flip a coin to see who stays and who goes?" "No need. I saw this coming, and Mom hasn't rented out my room yet. She's keeping it for me, at least until I'm 40 or until she has grandchildren, so, you're staying and I'm leaving, friends always," I said, and after a hug, she asked, "One last night together, please?" I had been back home for a week when, on Friday evening, as I was working on an article in my room, Mom called from downstairs. "Ethan, someone's here to see you." When I came down, I found Megan talking with Mom. Mom gave me a knowing look, then said, "I'll leave you two alone," and headed to the kitchen. "Hi, Ethan," Megan greeted me. "Hi, Megan. How are you?" "Okay, I guess. Hoping things will get better." "Oh, Chloe called and mentioned you're back on the market. She hinted I should hurry if I want to be first in line. Why even vie for the first spot? Why vie for it at all? There wouldn't be a line if I hadn't been foolish. In fact, Chloe wouldn't even exist. I'm not vying for a spot, Ethan. I just want to be back where I belong, and where's that?" she lifted her left hand, showing that she had never returned my ring. My class ring was still on her finger. "There's a party at Olivia Williams's tonight. Want to go with me?" she asked, dangling the idea in front of me. "Just so everyone knows, I'm staking my claim. I've got you back, and I'm making it clear." The real surprise came after the party. She was quiet as I drove her home, staring out the passenger window. When we got to her house, I suggested we go apartment hunting on Saturday. Renting an apartment is cheaper than staying in motels all the time. "Are you asking if I want to move in with you?" It crossed my mind. "What time?" "Around 9. "Great. You've got yourself a date." Megan and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment that was roughly halfway between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. We converted the second bedroom into an office, with her computer desk next to mine. About a month after we moved in, Brad came home on a 30-day leave and spent a lot of time with Megan and me. Seeing Brad and Rachel together, they seemed to be getting along well, making me doubt my earlier suspicions about her. However, 3 weeks after Brad went back to duty, Rachel showed up. With Brad deployed to Iraq, Rachel decided not to wait for him to return to base. She disappeared for 2 weeks, staying with her current partner. When she finally went to visit Brad in Norfolk 3 weeks later, rumors started up again about her hooking up with an old flame, including alleged wild parties and hosting group encounters. I thought about confronting her, but Megan talked me out of it, saying it wasn't our place to get involved. Besides, for all we knew, Brad and Rachel might have had an open relationship, a not uncommon arrangement during long military separations. Megan doubted Brad would ever agree to something like that, but she warned that telling him about Rachel's behavior could backfire. So, I decided to leave it alone. Brad returned from Afghanistan just in time to be my best man at my wedding to Megan. Afterward, he and Rachel moved to Norfolk, where he finished the last 9 months of his military service. When he was discharged, they came back home, and Brad got a job as a heavy equipment operator with a construction company. Over the next 2 years, the Turners, Brad and Rachel, became regular guests at our house, visiting us at least every other weekend. There were no signs of trouble between them, and no indication that Rachel was being unfaithful. Megan's theory seemed to hold up, especially when Brad's company won a contract to lay a pipeline in Alaska. Considering the harsh conditions at the construction site, Brad decided to leave Rachel at home for the 4-month duration of the project. Barely a week after Brad left, Rachel was spotted at a motel with Derek Lawson, the owner of Brad's company. After that, Derek's car became a familiar sight, parked in Brad's driveway almost every night of the week. The project in Alaska hit some snags, which extended Brad's time away by another 2 months. Coincidentally, Megan and Rachel shared the same doctor, and Megan happened to be at the office the day Rachel received some distressing news. She was 7 weeks pregnant, but Brad had been gone for over 3 months. Megan found out about Rachel's pregnancy from a couple of nurses who had gone to school with us. Knowing Megan's connection to Rachel, they asked her how she thought Brad would react when he found out. Sometimes, in the world of gossip among friends, patient confidentiality slips through the cracks. Megan speculated for a moment before saying, "Brad might never find out what I suspect. Rachel will probably opt for an abortion and handle the situation before Brad gets back," but things didn't go the way she expected. Someone, Megan wouldn't say who, decided to inform Brad about what was going on. When Brad returned, he rented a car and discreetly parked it nearby, waiting until he saw Lawson pull up to his house and go inside with Rachel. Brad waited about 15 minutes, giving them enough time to get comfortable, before he entered the house with a digital camera, ready to catch them in the act. Not long after, an ambulance arrived in response to an emergency call, and Lawson ended up in the hospital. When the police showed up, they initially intended to arrest Brad, but then he showed them the photos. He'd used a Canon Rebel camera set to continuous mode, and the series of images clearly showed Lawson lunging at Brad. Lawson might have just been trying to grab the camera from Brad, but the way the photos lined up made it clear that Brad was defending himself from what he saw as an attack. The police accepted his explanation and left. 20 minutes later, Rachel walked out onto the porch with a single suitcase and locked the door behind her. The divorce went smoothly, as did the lawsuit Brad filed against Lawson for alienation of affection. Brad also sued Lawson for essentially setting him up by sending him out of town and then moving in on his wife. Lawson had the option to settle out of court, which would have kept things quiet, but he chose to fight it, and his actions with his employee's wife became public knowledge. After a long trial, the jury ruled in Brad's favor, awarding him $1.3 million. After paying legal fees and taxes, he was left with just over $750,000. He used the money to pay off his house, put in an in-ground pool, and buy a brand new Ford F-350. Once the divorce was finalized, Rachel disappeared, and rumors suggested she had moved out of town. To cover the settlement, Lawson had to sell off some assets and property, and he also lost business as some customers and potential clients no longer trusted him after hearing how he treated his employee spouse. With some money still left over, Brad came to me with an idea: start our own company and take over the business Lawson had lost. I'd handle the design work, and Brad would manage the construction. After discussing it with Megan, we decided to go for it, and that's how RNJ Constructors was born. As partners, we thrived. Not only did we attract many of the clients who had left Lawson, but we also outperformed him on several projects. And knowing human nature, Brad made sure everyone knew whenever we outdid Lawson. The next 5 years flew by. Brad dated around but never found anyone he wanted to settle down with. He spent a lot of time with Megan and me, usually joining us once a week with whatever girlfriend he was seeing at the time. Everything seemed to be going great. Megan had climbed the corporate ladder, becoming a regional manager and the front-runner for a vice president position. I thought things couldn't get any better, and unfortunately, I was right. One Tuesday, as I was wrapping up a lunch meeting with a potential client, Derek Lawson approached me and asked if he could buy me a drink. Personally, I didn't hold any grudge against Derek. I figured if someone like Rachel, who I didn't think much of, offered comfort to a lonely guy like Derek, it wasn't fair to blame him for taking it. I never really bought into the idea that Derek had intentionally sent Brad away just to get close to Rachel. Knowing Rachel's character, I figured she might have gone to Derek's office to pick up Brad's paycheck and mentioned how lonely she was with Brad being gone. In any case, Derek's issues were with Brad, not with me, so I accepted his offer for a drink. Once we settled in, he asked, "How's everything going?" "Could be better," I replied. "Maybe you should think about selling," he suggested. "Selling? Why the hell would I do that?" I shot back. "To make your buddy Brad my business partner," he said. "Are you out of your mind?" I asked, shocked. "Not really." "Take a look at this," he said, opening his briefcase and handing me a folder. I took it, opened it, and was stunned. Inside was a photo of Megan and Brad holding hands as they entered a motel room. The folder contained several more photos showing Megan and Brad entering and leaving the motel room, along with a few images of them embracing and kissing in various locations. I looked up at Derek, who shrugged and said, "Sorry about this." I was tailing Brad to gather some evidence for my own revenge. When the private investigator handed me those photos, I didn't know she was your wife. I only figured out she was married because of the rings in the pictures. So, I hired another PI to dig up her identity so I could prepare my retaliation. "Why would you do that?" I asked, still reeling. "You were involved," Derek shot back. "No, I wasn't," I replied, trying to keep my anger in check. Yes, I had a fling with his wife, but I never orchestrated his departure to get to her. She walked into my office, closed the door, and started undressing. Then she looked me in the eye and said, "Since you sent Brad away, you'll have to take care of me until he gets back." But I'm single, so I had to turn her down. As far as I'm concerned, this whole mess is Brad's fault. Everyone knows Rachel's been promiscuous since high school. Brad should have known better, but he didn't do anything about it. No, Ethan, he hit me hard with that lawsuit, and I plan to hit back. I'm just sorry you got caught in the crossfire. Any idea how long this has been going on? I asked, struggling to process the situation. According to the PI's findings, it's been at least a year, maybe longer. How could it go unnoticed for so long? If she never raised any red flags, how did you even find out? So why the interest in buying me out? What's in it for you to partner up with Brad? Derek smirked. Think of it as an equal partnership. If he suggests plan A, I'll push for plan B. Whatever he wants, I'll be there to oppose it. Plus, I'll control the pricing and make sure we undercut the competition. I'll run the company into the ground, and Brad will feel the pain, but so will you, I pointed out. Not entirely. I've done my homework. If the business collapses, we'll liquidate the assets, and I'll recover most of my investment. I won't make a profit, unless you count the money I'll earn from my other ventures by underbidding Brad, but I won't take any major losses either. What if he comes after you like he did last time? I asked. Last time, he caught me with his wife, and I was more focused on grabbing the camera than defending myself. If he tries something again, it won't go down the same way. In fact, I'm confident I can handle him if it comes to that. So, are you interested? Maybe, but I want to do my own digging first before I decide. You got a ballpark figure in mind? I proposed a number, and he said it was doable, telling me to reach out if I wanted to move forward. I left that meeting with Lawson feeling completely rattled. How could Megan and Brad have been carrying on like this for nearly a year without me noticing a thing? I hadn't seen any signs of dissatisfaction from Megan, no drop in affection. From my point of view, our life together seemed unchanged. What had gone wrong? While I trusted Detective Derek's findings and the evidence, I couldn't shake the thought that the photos might have been tampered with or that Derek had his own motives. I needed to be sure before I made any moves. Back at the office, I contacted a friend at an insurance agency for recommendations on private investigators. Armed with that info, I set up a meeting, and 13 days later, I was certain. On what were supposed to be work trips, Brad had been meeting up with Megan at the Comfort Inn on Melrose. How she managed to get time off work for their rendezvous was beyond me. Now I had to figure out my next steps, though I already knew what I wanted to do. I just needed to come up with a plan. After spending 2 hours with a lawyer, I had a clear understanding of my options and obligations. With no fault grounds, assets would be split evenly. But I was concerned about Megan getting her hands on part of the proceeds from selling my stake in the company, so I realized I'd need to be sneaky about it. Even so, she was still entitled to a portion of the proceeds. I struck a deal with Lawson to sell him my stake in the company officially for 1/3 of its actual value. 1/3 of the payment went into a bank account in my name only, while the remaining 2/3 were funneled into an offshore account I'd set up. The deal included an agreement that Lawson wouldn't show up at the office or take over my desk until the morning I handed Megan and Brad the necessary documents. Megan filed for divorce, citing infidelity, and Brad filed a lawsuit for alienation of affection. Even though we lived in a no-fault state, I could still pursue legal action for adultery, which could lead to a slightly better division of assets in my favor, though not by much. To prove infidelity, I needed solid evidence. The reports from both Derek's private investigator and mine matched up perfectly, showing the same motel rendezvous every Wednesday. My detective secured a room for surveillance and bribed the porter to make sure Megan and Brad were assigned to that specific room. On Wednesday morning, I instructed Sophie, our receptionist, to tell Brad I'd be out due to a dentist appointment and that I might not be back in the afternoon if I wasn't feeling well afterward. Once the effects of the gas wore off, I left the house and returned after Megan had gone to work. The locksmith arrived right on time at 9 to change all the locks. When he was done, I went to the bank and emptied out both our accounts and the safe. My lawyer had advised me to take only half, but I was in no mood to be reasonable. Screw you, Megan. I had no intention of making this easy for her. She'd have to fight for her share, and I was ready to make it as hard as possible. I also withdrew the funds I anticipated from the business. If it turned out to be too much, Brad could always challenge it in court. But until then, it was mine. At 12:10, my detective called to inform me that the couple had checked into room 128. I drove over, had a quick word with the detective, and then positioned myself on the hood of a nearby car, waiting for them to come out. After a tense encounter, I left the scene. As I was driving away, I saw a man approach them and hand over the papers. Along with the divorce papers, Megan was served with a temporary restraining order, requiring her to stay 500 feet away from me in our home. Getting that order required a bit of deception. I had to fabricate a story about a third party tipping me off that Brad and Megan were discussing my insurance coverage and the value of my business shares. A hearing was scheduled to determine whether the restraining order would be made permanent, but that could take a few weeks. It was just another move to keep Megan off balance. The key point was that she couldn't enter the house without a court-appointed supervisor, and I had no intention of making myself available to give her a key to the new locks. With Brad's papers for the foreclosure attachment suit, I included a brief note. You know how these suits go, don't you? How does it feel to be on the receiving end? As I drove away from the motel, I called Derek on his cell phone. Everything's in place. Enjoy your first day at the office tomorrow. After hanging up, I headed to the airport, parked in the long-term lot, stashed my cell phone in the glove compartment, and boarded a flight to Cabo San Lucas. I spent a week scuba diving and lounging on the beach, trying to clear my head. When I got back home and turned on my phone, it was flooded with voicemails. Most of them were from Megan, as expected, but there were 4 from Brad as well. You'd think he'd be the last person eager to talk to me, but there it was. Still, I had no desire to speak with either of them. Did I want an explanation? Of course. I wanted to know why. But I had resolved to leave them in the past and focus on moving forward. Their reasons for betraying me weren't something I wanted to dwell on. My attorney knew I'd be gone for a week, so I called him to let him know I was back. He suggested I reach out to Megan, who had been trying to contact me twice a day to get access to the house and retrieve her belongings under court supervision. I was about to tell him to make arrangements with the court when a different idea came to mind, a way to rattle her even more. I called Megan and asked what she needed. I need my clothes and other items, but I can't enter the house even with court supervision because I don't have a key, and they won't let me break in, she explained. There's nothing there for you to take, I replied coldly. I donated everything to Goodwill. I don't want any reminders of your deceitful behavior. There's nothing of yours left, not even a hair clip, I added. You had no right to do that, she snapped. I had every right, just like you had the right to betray me, I shot back. We need to talk, it's not what you think, she pleaded. Be honest, Megan. I know you weren't happy with Brad. I'm sure of it. Goodbye, Megan, I ended the call. In truth, Megan's belongings were still in the house, but I was purposely delaying her from retrieving them. It was my way of keeping her unsettled, ensuring she wouldn't get her things back anytime soon. I've always had a good relationship with Sophie, our receptionist, secretary, bookkeeper, cook, and cleaner all rolled into one, so I gave her a call to check in. Not too bad for me, she said, but things aren't going well for the company. Derek and Brad are constantly at each other's throats over the smallest things. Brad gives orders, and Derek flat out refuses to follow them. Orders are placed and then cancelled almost immediately. Work grinds to a halt while they argue. I was fed up, so I handed in my resignation last Friday. But Derek offered to double my salary if I stayed, so I decided to stick around. They even got into a physical fight last Thursday, but there wasn't a clear winner, though Brad did end up with a broken nose. Why did you leave us? Why side with Derek? I asked. I told her the whole story, and she was quiet for a moment before responding. Now I have another reason to stay. What's that? I asked. I can help Derek. I never liked Brad. He was always flirting with me, even though he knew I was engaged. Once, he even suggested that he'd let me go if I agreed to a date with him. We both know what he meant by that. When I asked what you would think if he fired me, he didn't have much to say. You should have told me, I said. Why? It was my problem, and I handled it. I feel for you and Megan, Ethan, but there might be a silver lining for me. How's that? I asked, curious. Well, it means you're available again. How do you feel about being pursued? I thought you were engaged, I replied, surprised. I was, until I caught that idiot doing to me what Megan did to you. When did that happen? I asked. About 3 weeks ago. Well, if you're interested, I'll consider you first when I'm ready to start dating again. But that won't be for a while. I don't want to give Megan any ammunition. I can wait, she said softly. But keep me in mind if you ever feel lonely and want some company for dinner. I will, sweetie. And thank you. My phone rang 16 times that day, 14 calls from Megan and 2 from Brad. I couldn't imagine what Brad could possibly have to say that I'd want to hear. If he was calling to ask for something, it sure wasn't going to be from me. I deleted all the calls and went home, made myself dinner, and then, on a whim, I called Derek Lawson to check on how things were going with his plan. Not bad. Not bad at all, Derek replied with a hint of satisfaction. I made sure to be sitting at your desk when you walked in. The moment he saw me, he frowned and demanded to know why I was in the office and at your desk. I couldn't help but chuckle as I informed him that I was his new partner. The look on his face was priceless. You could practically see the steam coming out of his ears as he skimmed through a copy of our agreement. It was pure gold. What happened next? I asked, intrigued. Well, I got things off to a good start right away. He called for a fuel truck because the front-end loader and some other equipment at Wilkins' site were out of diesel. As soon as he left the office, I called and canceled the order. One of the loaders ran out of fuel, and Brad called Allied to chew them out. They told him I had canceled the order and that they wouldn't put up with his behavior, suggesting he find fuel elsewhere. That's when he stormed back into the office, demanding to know what I was up to. I told him Allied was overcharging us, and I was looking for a better deal. Things went downhill from there. Little birdie told me you two ended up in a fistfight, I said, smirking. Indeed, we did. It all went down last Thursday, and the outcome, I might have been a bit too optimistic when I said I could take him, but I managed to get past it and gave him a good beating. Well, keep it up, and good luck with the rest of your plan. After hanging up, I headed to the room I'd turned into an office, fired up my computer, and started working on my resume. I planned to begin my job search the next day. As I typed away, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found Brad standing there. What the hell do you want? I snapped. We need to talk, Ethan, he said, trying to sound calm. No, we don't, creep, it's not my fault, Ethan. She came on to me. She caught me in a bad mood after what Rachel did to me. I wasn't thinking straight. I'm sorry, Ethan, but it wasn't my fault. I didn't go after her, but you knew she was my wife. You knew how you felt when you found out about Rachel. And you didn't even stop to think that you'd make me feel the same way, did you? You had to know I'd find out sooner or later, probably the same way you found out about Rachel. Someone told you. Well, creep, somebody told me you're a scoundrel. You were supposed to be my friend. And even if I believe that Megan made the first move, which I don't, you should have turned her down just like I turned Rachel away when she tried to come on to me. You knew better, but you went ahead anyway. And even if she did catch you off guard, that doesn't excuse the second, third, fourth, and however many times after that. No, you stabbed me in the back, plain and simple. So why did you set me up with Lawson? He asked, anger seeping into his voice. Because in the mood I was in when I found out, if I'd come after you, things might have ended differently. But you're not worth going to jail over. Besides, involving Lawson will bring you grief that will last far longer than any consequences from a physical fight. But you know what? The rage I felt back then is gone, and that's when I punched him. I grabbed his shirt, yanked him into the house, slammed the door shut, and let loose all the anger I'd been holding back. He was out cold by the time I dragged him out to his car. You wouldn't believe the grin on my face when I walked back inside. I figured the police might show up, but I wasn't worried. I could easily claim he attacked me, and I acted in self-defense. I'd point to his altercation with Lawson and say he was upset because I sold my share of the business to Lawson and he was trying to get back at me. The next day, I sent out 14 resumes and checked in with my attorney. He mentioned there was a hearing scheduled for the temporary restraining order the following Monday, but he hadn't heard anything from Megan or her lawyer. I considered reaching out to Megan but decided against it. The longer she went without a lawyer, the longer she'd have to wait to talk to me. Throughout the week, I got responses to my resumes and traveled to Atlanta on Wednesday and Baltimore on Thursday for interviews. I liked both, but then I heard back from a company in San Diego, and the thought of a warmer climate intrigued me. I scheduled an interview for the following Tuesday. Monday rolled around, and I showed up at the restraining order hearing. Surprisingly, the judge found no reason to uphold it and ordered me to let Megan into the house. Megan showed up with her lawyer and tried to talk to me afterward, but I stepped aside, sought my lawyer's assistance, and returned to her with a stern look. You wait until my attorney gets here before you speak to me, I insisted. I just wanted to tell you I'll be coming by tonight, she said. No, you won't. I have a job interview at 2:30 and won't be back until Wednesday. You can come by after 6, I replied coldly. Her lawyer started to protest, but I cut him off. She will not set foot in this house without supervision. A court representative will oversee everything, and you're welcome to have your attorney present too. That's not satisfactory, her lawyer argued. They won't understand what she's taking. If she grabs something inappropriate, I'll have to fight to get it back. She's managed just fine for 2 weeks, another 48 hours won't harm her, I said firmly. Her lawyer sighed and replied, then let's wait for the judge's decision. As he turned to leave, Megan spoke up, forget it. I can wait, I nodded and said, Wednesday at 6, before walking away. Wait a moment, Ethan. Can we talk? She asked. No, I replied, heading out of the building. Satisfied with my interview in San Diego, I returned home, eagerly awaiting news from the company. At 6 o'clock, Megan arrived with a representative from her lawyer's office. The court-appointed observer showed up at 6:26, and during those 20 minutes, we chatted over coffee. She explained that her role was to inventory the items being taken and note any disputes. There won't be any disputes, I assured her. She can take whatever she wants, if that's your stance. Why did you take such a firm position against her? She asked. Because she betrayed me, and she did it with someone who had been my best friend for over 25 years. I couldn't retaliate physically without legal consequences, but I had to do something to make her feel some of the pain she caused me. It wasn't much, but it was something. When the doorbell rang, I let Megan and the man from her lawyer's office inside, then stepped out to mow the lawn. When I came back in, everyone had left except Megan, who was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea. She looked up as I walked in. You deceived me. You didn't donate any of my things to Goodwill, did you? Maybe not, I replied. But I enjoyed seeing your reaction when you thought I did, she sighed, looking defeated. I didn't expect everything to end up in my hands. It's going to take me longer to sort through all this than I thought. I pulled out my key ring, removed the house key, and slid it across the table to her. No need to rush. You can pick up the keys on Friday. I'll be out of the house by then. Why? She asked, her voice trembling. Why go through all this if you were planning to give me the house and leave? Why the restraining order? Why lie about getting rid of my stuff? She paused. That's a naive question. After what you put me through, I had to strike back somehow. Just be thankful I chose a peaceful way instead of a violent one. Just because I didn't lash out physically doesn't mean you're off the hook, but it's the best I could do without ending up in legal trouble. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. I remember you said you didn't want to talk tonight, but I'm still going to try to convince you that a divorce isn't necessary. Let's be realistic, Megan. After what you've done, there's no way we can salvage our marriage, but that doesn't change my feelings for you, Ethan. I love you, and you know it. What happened with Brad was a mistake, a stupid, foolish mistake. I've always liked Brad, but my feelings for him don't come close to what I feel for you. Your feelings for Brad don't matter. The fact is, you had a good time with him. Whether you loved him or not, it's still cheating, and you know how I feel about that. You saw how devastated I was when I found out about Rachel and Brad. I was so torn up that I almost told him, but you convinced me not to. That should have made it clear how I would feel if you did the same to me. And don't give me excuses like you didn't want me to find out. Cheaters always get caught. Always. Brad found out about Rachel because someone saw them together and told him. It's the same way I found out about you and Brad going into that motel room. Doesn't my love for you matter? She asked, her voice trembling. No, Megan, it doesn't. Because it wasn't enough to keep you from betraying me, but Ethan, it didn't mean anything. Really, it was nothing. It was just a stupid mistake, an accident. How could sleeping with my former best friend be an accident? He came over while you were in Santa Fe. He was all messed up about Rachel. Even after cutting her out of his life, he still missed her. We had a drink, and when he started crying, I hugged him, trying to comfort him. I remember thinking, this is so wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. But at the same time, it felt oddly comforting. I'll admit it, it felt strangely exciting. The next time you were out of town, Brad came by, and we both knew what was going to happen. And we did it again. But there was no love, Ethan. It was purely physical, just a fleeting thrill. Through it all, I never stopped loving you. You know that. We can get past this. We don't need to get a divorce. Love has nothing to do with this, Megan. I need a divorce. I can't stay with someone who's betrayed me. It's simple. You broke my trust. If I stayed, I'd always be watching you, waiting for the next betrayal. By your own admission, you kept doing it because you enjoyed the thrill of it. You can promise all you want that it won't happen again, but your promises don't mean anything. You vowed to forsake all others when we got married, and you broke that vow. I just can't bring myself to believe a word you say anymore, Megan. Brad's account of what happened is completely at odds with yours. According to him, it wasn't some mistake. He claims you were deliberately toying with him. Now, either he's lying, or you are. The problem is, after everything both of you pulled, neither of you can be trusted as far as I'm concerned. So I'm stuck here, unable to believe one story over the other. The bottom line, Megan, is that we're done as a couple. But I'm not giving up, Ethan. I'm going to fight for this marriage. I know we can work through this because I believe we still love each other. You're angry with me right now, and I understand that. But I promise you, I'll do whatever it takes to make it right this time. Especially now that I know what breaking that promise really means. My lawyer says we can get the court to order counseling, and I'm sure that can help us. Ethan, I love you, and I'm not letting go. What you don't seem to get, Megan, is that I don't want you anymore. Sure, I'll admit I still have feelings for you, and it's going to take time for me to move on. But there's just no way I can live with you again. Every night I'd be lying there, thinking about you with that fool who used to be my best friend, and that's not a life I can handle. So, you're not going to fight for this divorce, Megan? Because if you don't, I'll make sure that the video of your last little meeting with Brad goes public. Every single one of your family members, all your friends, and everyone you work with will get a copy. Hell, I might even set up a nice little adult site just for you. And there are plenty of amateur sites out there where I can post it too, along with your full name and address. Life's going to get very interesting for you if you don't go through with this. There's no video, Ethan. You're bluffing. Oh, really? Hold on. I walked over to the den where I'd left my briefcase, pulled out a copy of the disc, and went back to the kitchen. I handed it to her. Here, take a look. After you've watched it, decide if you want anyone else to see it. Now, if you don't mind, there's something I need to get done. You can come by to collect your things on Friday, but for now, I need you out by Thursday. I packed up and moved out of the house, storing most of my belongings. I rented a room at the executive suites for a month, figuring I'd have a job by the end of it. Over the next 2 weeks, I traveled to Salt Lake City, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago, and Detroit for interviews. I felt pretty good about most of them, but nobody got back to me. So, I sat down, crunched the numbers, and realized I could survive without a job for about 6 years. I started looking into cities and states where the cost of living was lower, hoping to stretch those 6 years into 8 or even 10. Megan finally signed the divorce papers and sent them back to my lawyer. Honestly, I almost wished she hadn't. I would have loved nothing more than to scatter CDs of her and Brad all over the place. But a deal's a deal. We settled on a 50-50 split of the assets, with each of us paying our own legal fees. Since I filed the suit, I covered the attorney costs. Megan wanted the house, and my half of the equity was just about what I owed the bank, so that worked out. Sure, I had to give Megan half of what I got from selling my share of the company, but I'd planned for that. She accused me of selling out too cheaply, but it didn't matter. The other 2/3 of what I got from the sale was safely tucked away. I heard some juicy gossip not long after. Turns out, as soon as I was out of the picture, Brad started harassing Megan so badly that she had to get a restraining order against him. Not that I cared, of course. But I couldn't help but find it amusing. I decided to wait until the divorce was final before making any moves. Eventually, I started getting calls from some of the companies where I'd interviewed. A company in San Diego reached out, asking me to come back for another round. But before I could even call them to set it up, Derek got in touch. How would you like your company back? Why on earth would I want it back? I sold it to you to get away from Brad and leave all that behind. Why would I want to become his partner again? You wouldn't have to. After our last argument, I told him if he was so unhappy with me as a partner, I'd either buy him out or sell my share to someone else. He thought about it for a good 30 seconds, then asked how much I'd pay for his halves. He accepted half of what I gave you. The question remains, why would you want the company back? If you've done even half of what you said you would to ruin Brad, the company might not be worth much now, you might be surprised. Come to the office, and let's talk. Figuring I had nothing to lose, I went to see him. When I walked in, Sophie jumped up from her desk and hugged me, then poked her head into Derek's office to let him know I was there. As you know, I only bought you out to mess with Turner. I didn't really need him, but things are changing. I'm getting more into the construction side of the business. I want to move away from the engineering part. On one hand, I couldn't get the engineers I wanted, so I started considering alternatives. The solution that came to mind was to call you and ask you to set up a company that I would contract with for the engineering work. But then Turner sold me the company, and I thought, why not just sell it to you and contract with you? I can't afford to buy out both my half and Brad's half. You won't have to pay much because the company isn't worth much anymore. Since I own everything, I've transferred all the construction work and equipment to my other company. What's left is purely the engineering part. I'll sell you the company for what I paid Brad and sign a 5-year contract for engineering services. Plus, the company still has contracts with about 15 other firms. I don't see how you can lose. How much did you give Brad? He told me, and it was less than I had in my offshore account. But there is one condition, he added. And what's that? I have no secrets from Sophie, and I shared the idea with her. She said that if you agree, she'll stay with you and not move to my company. If you accept the deal, you'll keep her on your team. I didn't have to think long before I told him I'd agree to the deal, but not until my divorce was finalized, which would be in about 3 weeks at the earliest. Derek said that was fine with him, and we shook on it. As I was leaving the office, Sophie said, I heard. Don't forget that in 3 weeks, you promised I'd be first on the list. I didn't think you were serious about that. You can bet I am, she said with a smile that could light up the whole block. As I pulled away from the curb, my phone rang. It was my lawyer. Brad had learned his lesson from what happened with Derek. When Derek sued Brad, he called my lawyer with an offer to settle the case, and I told the lawyer to accept it. I made it back to my room at the executive suites with a grin from ear to ear. In 3 weeks, I'd be starting a new life with a new job, a new girlfriend, and money in the bank. I could spend those 3 weeks hunting for a new place to live and shopping for furniture. Who says nice guys always finish last?